Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Comic Source. Here today to talk about an upcoming Image title. As you're listening to this, it's going to be out this week, everybody. It comes out October 23rd. I have the writer, Sabir Pirzada, joining me to talk about The Sacred Damned. Number one, it's part of the Horizon experiment. Maybe you got a chance to check out our Manchurian episode with Pornsak Pichachot. So, Sabir, thank you for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me.
Why don't you let everybody know? You know what? I realized I just said your name incorrectly. Saber. My apologies.
No worries.
Why don't you let everybody know what the Sacred Damned is all about?
Yeah, so the Sacred Damned was an attempt to satisfy the mandate given to me by Pornsak Pichachot across the entire Horizon experiment. So the Horizon experiment is essentially when you take a popular genre and you infuse that with a character of an underrepresented group or a concept from, representing the culture of an underrepresented group, so that it actually alters the structure of the entire genre, so that you can't just sort of sub in, somebody with a different skin tone and you've got the exact same story. There actually has to be a ripple effect that kind of allows you to display the full ambition of representing a different viewpoint or diverse element. And so that got me excited about what we could do in the horror space. In particular, if you take popular Christian iconography that you've seen in stories such as Dracula or one of my favorite horror movies, The Exorcist, which take Christian iconography and you replace it with Islamic iconography. What does that look like and what is the ripple effect of that? And so out of that, we got a sort of Muslim version of John Constantine, who I'm calling Dr. Inaya Jibril. She is a professor of ethnography and the occult, and she has her own approach to fighting demons or exploring the ripple effects of how the supernatural bleeds into our world. Some of it is steeped in Islamic lore. Hopefully we get to tell more stories and in which we'll explore all different avenues of the supernatural. But her approach is always going to be that from the Muslim world, essentially, which doesn't treat the supernatural in the same way that you've seen in typical Western stories. Typical Western stories, it's always treated as, that's the problem, we have to vanquish the demon, and that's it. It's a little bit more complicated from the Islamic perspective. And so that's the main element I wanted to honor through Inaya's perspective.
Yeah, and I've had a chance to read it, everybody. It's really fantastic, and I want to dive. Obviously, we won't get spoilery, but we're going to talk kind of about some of the themes and how everything was developed, because it is, a little bit different, as most of us come from reading Western comics. But before we get into that, I want to go back to something that you said, Saber, about the way Pornsak approached it. I like how you put it that, he said it's not just changing the skin tone and inserting X, right? And we saw that with Manchurian, the Horizon Experiment book that's already out, because it's not just, okay, here's an Asian James Bond. The story heavily focused on the difference between spycraft between East and West. Again, it's more than just this superficial sort of lip service to inclusion, I guess we'll say. So when he first approached you with that idea, did you take it as a challenge? Did you think, this is going to be a lot of fun? Was it a bit of both? Like, how long did it take you to actually sit down and come up with this idea?
Yeah, it was a bit of both. The initial idea I had actually was not what the Sacred Damned was. This was sort of the second or third idea, if I remember correctly. I had another idea that, unfortunately, my representation, my manager, my lawyer, felt was a little bit too close to one of my TV projects and that it could lead me to legal trouble. So I actually had to back off of that. But I had this idea simmering for a while of just wanting to explore an Islamic take on the horror space. What I didn't know was like how that ripple effect was going to sort of shape the entire story. And so that I had to do some digging on, just in terms of how does the Islamic approach to the supernatural kind of lay itself out. And as I did a little bit more research on, what I will call real life examples or secondhand narrations from other people, I started to get a little bit more of a holistic approach to what this whole thing could be, and that got me very excited. So it was fun. I can't say that it was a totally out of left field thing for me, because as someone who has written on shows such as Ms. Marvel and Moon Knight as well, Moon Knight has an Egyptology element to it. Ms. Marvel also has an Islamic element to it. So I'm familiar with playing in this type of territory where you're representing a minority group in a very popular realm that a lot of Westerners may not be familiar with every element of it. And so it's territory that is always very exciting to me. And I felt like I could bring that experience into this wholly original thing that doesn't have to fit into a greater Marvel universe. It can be kind of its own thing. And what does that look like?
Yeah, now we want to be clear, everybody. This is a single issue. Again, it's out on October 23rd. If it sells well enough, and based on quality, it should, then we're going to be able to get more. But if you want to pick this up, it is a complete story. I want to make that clear. But let's go back to something else that you said before, of this kind of more of a Western idea or concept of the supernatural being a problem to solve, as opposed to, if we're talking about kind of in that Islamic space, it's more, I don't know if I want to use the word accepted, but sort of believed in a way, if you will. And that, I think, colors the whole outlook of how you approach it, how you deal with it. So you come at it from a very different place in terms of a storytelling sort of starting spot. Isn't that true?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to get too spoilerific here, but the general idea of entities of a supernatural nature is that they also possess free will equal to human beings. And so they're not inherently evil, just like human beings are not inherently evil.
Right.
And so if they are interfering or interacting with our side of the world, the question becomes, why are they doing that? Is it a response to something we did first? And then you start to sort of unpack the layers as to what these interactions look like and how do you resolve them. And you do it from the perspective of Inaya Jabril, who is somebody who may or may not be super excited about her fellow human beings. That was another element that editor Will Dennis sort of helped sort of prod me into digging deeper on, which is, what is her relationship with both humanity as a human being herself and the supernatural, and can we complicate that dynamics that she becomes this interesting sort of middle force that is a little bit mysterious, and you kind of don't know how she's going to treat one over the other. And that gave me whole new elements to play with that I hadn't thought of until I started working with Will.
Yeah, and obviously the comparisons to John Constantine, being a name that a lot of people are going to be familiar with, and it's sort of a starting point. And certainly some of the things that she has in common are that sort of give no shits attitude.
Yes.
Where, you mentioned her not necessarily being on, the side of humans or the side of the supernatural or what have you. It's, in a way, she's almost on her own side. But how much fun is it to write a character like that that's really just going to say whatever they want to say, do whatever they want to do? Is there freedom in that creatively?
Oh my God, it's so fun and so liberating. I think it's because I had spent so much time writing this other character of Ms. Marvel in the Disney world, which is like, this is a Disney-owned superhero. It's supposed to be a family-friendly type of approach to things. And so I very much felt like I had to always keep the kid gloves on with Kamala Khan, which is another character that is beloved to me. But the fact that this is a wholly original thing that is in the horror genre, so it's for a mature audience, you can have a character that gives no fucks and that can just kind of, say exactly what's on her mind, and that you can challenge your reader a little bit more in terms of, making sure that you can go in a direction where they're not necessarily going to like everything she says, in terms of finding her to be this sort of, bubbling, very polite presence. She can push back a lot on the victim sometimes, which is sometimes hard to watch, but it's also intriguing. And it implies so many more layers to how she got that way, which felt like really fertile ground to explore and just kind of natural with the horror genre as well.
Yeah,
so,
well,
I had a blast.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, how she got that way, because that's the thing. Like, Constantine has been around for, a long time, and we've seen a lot of different takes on his origin, but it's sort of been established of why he's such a dick, right? With
Sure.
Inaya, you may only get, we hope not, but you may only get this one issue. We get some hints, but obviously it's not fleshed out because it's just sort of a space thing, right? Just not enough space. How tough was that? Because I'm sure there was a part of you that, hey, I want to kind of dive in and explore more, but again, limited page count.
Yeah, limited page count. It sort of started from the beginning as a structural attempt I knew I wanted to make, which is I don't mind keeping Inaya mysterious in this story. That I think she works better kind of sort of at arm's length because that way you don't know what you're going to get with her. Is she going to complicate the problem? Is she going to make it worse? Or is she just going to come in and solve everything for you so that the main character, not the main character, but the main POV, I should say, is actually not hers. It's of the person experiencing the supernatural. Might feel a little bit too at ease, and then you're undercutting your own scares. So I kind of knew that with a Constantine type of character, these characters are powerful. They know how to navigate this stuff, this supernatural realm so well that I didn't want her to be fully accessible to the victim who is undergoing the supernatural phenomenon. And so I sort of built that from the ground up in terms of saying, let's stay in the victim's perspective for as long as we can. And then when Inaya shows up, she still remains sort of unpredictable and difficult to understand. And that the mystery will only enhance our interest in her was the gamble that I wanted to take with this story. So I was excited to kind of take that approach. And we'll see how the world reacts to that. But I know it's a little bit unconventional in terms of let's not give the origin right up front. I know what the origin is, and I hint at it in the last few pages of the series, which I'm not going to give away. But as long as I know it, I can sort of play with it a little bit more and keep her in the shadows and see what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think the gamble paid off really, really well because it is an impactful scene with some fantastic Michael Walsh art. We'll talk about your collaboration here in a second. But yeah, when she first shows up, you just get this sense, hey, she's a badass. And then as you kind of learn more and things are playing out, there's just sort of this assumption, from things like the Exorcist movie you mentioned of somebody who's dealing with the supernatural being the hero, being the good guy or whatever. But as things play out, it may not be as, black and white as you might think, which, again, I think that gamble to keep it mysterious really paid off because I finished the issue going, I really want more of this. I want to learn more about Inaya and who she is and why she's the way she is.
Sure. Yeah, I hope we get a chance to tell those stories. I've talked to Michael Walsh about, future ideas, just sort of, in passing briefly. And, he was excited about it. I've teased a little bit with Pornsak Pichetshow. So, we're hopeful that we get to tell more and not to just keep Inaya a mystery forever, but to pick and choose how we sort of unspool why she is the way she is so that every time you get a piece of her, not only do you understand more, but you want to know more, and that it opens up a whole new avenue of story to tell with her so that, no piece of information is wasted. So that's the hope, we'll see, how much readership shows up, but very excited at the very least for people to see Michael Walsh's tremendous artwork in this thing. I mean, I think he's firing on all cylinders here.
Oh yeah, he's just creatively. I don't know if there's anybody that draws horror better than him. Yeah, it's just fantastic. But I like what you said though about. So if we get to tell more, it's still about her on, for lack of a better term, we'll call them cases, right? Her going out and being consulted as an expert in the occult and revealing her origin through those situations she's in, rather than just saying, okay, next book I'm going to put out is just, hey, here's her as a kid. Here's what happened. Like
exactly.
That's been done a ton, but I don't know that it would be as interesting as the start that we have here with things being revealed very slow, kind of a slow burn in terms of pacing.
Yeah, that's the hope. I mean, we'll see. Hey, plans can change and all that, but yeah. It seemed to me that for a story that lives in the shadows so much, why not have your guide also live in the shadows and kind of slowly come out of them? But let the shadows kind of follow her as she does that. So.
Right, exactly. But I'm sure it's a balance too, right? Because then the other thing is if you drag it on too long, people, it's kind of like, as you know, working in the television field, when that whole cliche of, will the guy and girl get together? Will they, won't they kind of thing. If you drag it on for too many seasons, people just are like frustrated and they.
100%. I mean, pacing is everything.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, so. Exactly. And this is again, everybody, because a limited page count. Don't know if we're going to get more. So there's a lot packed in. It is very impactful. But I'm glad that, especially when we first see Inaya, it is a full page spread from Michael Walsh. I mentioned her looking like a badass. How much? I mean, again, he's a master. So I'm curious, how much input on like character design for her? And with the supernatural aspects, you want them to look a certain way. How much back and forth was there between you and Michael?
So for Anaya, there was a lot of back and forth, and I felt the pressure to sort of make sure that we got it all right from the cultural representation standpoint. So I consulted all three of my sisters, two of which wear hijab, one of which does not. I got my wife's perspective, my mom's perspective. Like I really wanted to round out what the reaction of female readership would be to seeing a character who represents, their culture, their faith, their ethnicity, even if they've got a different relationship with their faith and values than Inaya does. So that one we really put through a rigorous test process to kind of see, how would people react if the scarf was of a certain size or if it was worn a certain way, how tight can the clothing be? All those things were heavily scrutinized. And Michael was along for the ride, and he had his own input and, things he wanted to do with the design of the character in the action elements of the series. And so we kept that alive and made sure that we preserved that while making sure we were, as faithful as possible to the representation elements. Now, when it comes to the supernatural side, I really wanted him to run wild with it because he is the master of horror, and I wanted him to sort of steer the ship there. I gave him a few ideas to say, hey, in the lore that I have done my research on, here are the three elements that, I kept finding over and over again. Feel free to take them or leave them, but this world is your world to design when you bring it out of the shadows. And he went crazy with it, and it was really fun and exciting to see what he would do, to the point where sometimes I would be satisfied with what he did on the page, and so would the editors, and we all thought we were moving on, and then he would kind of come back to it and say, surprise, I felt I could do better, and so I just kind of, here's what I did. And he would give us a whole brand new, set of artwork, and it was better, but we didn't ask him to do that. He's just a perfectionist that way. So it was a really fun collaborative process.
Yeah, and again, everybody, we want you to pick it up and read it for yourself, but I will say that there is one, I guess we'll say a character, somebody that's kind of linked to Anaya in a way that shows up throughout, toward the second half, and clearly is supernatural and has a connection to her that is just so, like, gives me chills even just thinking about it. Yeah, just the eyes, the juxtaposition of the character, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But yeah,
and a lot of that came from Michael because he is the master of sort of body horror, but hitting you with it when you don't expect it to show up. So, like, I would have to go back to the script and like to jog my own memory because I don't even remember writing some of those things that way. But when you see him sort of illustrate some of it, and again, I'm going to be deliberately vague here because that is one of the last beats of the story, and I don't want to give it away. But yeah, I couldn't be happy with how that turned out, and I give Michael all the credit.
The word that comes to mind is just creepy. It's just creepy as hell, man. It's just like, oh, and yeah, it leaves you certainly wanting more. So, well. Thank you so much for your time, Saber. Best of luck with the title. I really hope it sells like gangbusters so we can get some more. But as we're winding down here, a couple things. Anything else that you want to share with our audience? And if anybody wants to follow, I don't know if you're active on social media or what have you. You mentioned your television work. You have other comic work that you've done. So where's the best place online to give you a follow?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. My handle is just my name, Saber Pirzada. And yeah, that's where you can find out, all the things that I'm up to. Sacred Dam comes out October 23rd. I also have a couple of Marvel comics coming out simultaneously. One of them is Spirits of Vengeance, which is a take on all the different Ghost Riders. And the other is Venom War Lethal Protectors, which is a tie-in to the larger crossover of Venom War happening in the Spider-Man and Venom books right now, featuring Silver Sable. So those things I'm doing on the comic side. On the TV side, I'm writing on a TV show called FBI currently. And by the time I think this comes out, the fall premiere will have just happened. But that's on Tuesdays at 8 o'clock on CBS.
Fantastic. I'll put a link to the social media in the show notes, everybody. So if you're having trouble finding them, you can go there. Definitely let your comic shop know. Again, final order cutoff has passed for this book, but hopefully they ordered some copies. As far hasn't sold out at distributor level either. So let them know now, and they can get that reorder in because you definitely want to check it out. If you're a fan of Constantine, if you're a fan of horror, if you're a fan of Michael Walsh, or if you're just a fan of really like kick-ass female characters and good stories, you're going to want to check this out. All right, well that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. We appreciate you joining us as always, and we will talk to you next time.